Riva Chorja agus Fáilte. So on behalf of Greylock, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you all to this information meeting on the draft specifications for Irish in Irish medium post-primary schools inside and outside of the Greylock. As you're aware, there is a live consultation process on this matter ongoing, led by the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment. And this meeting is being held independent of the NCCA, the department and any other bodies, and represents an initiative of Greylock to help raise awareness of the issues pertaining to the draft specification as we see them. Additionally, we aim to address the many questions that you've sent in, for which we're very grateful, and we tried to capture the essence of these on the following slides. So you can see the overarching themes here, and you've been invited also to, you're invited also to add in extra questions, which you can type into the chat at the end. And I will direct those questions to the panel. The challenge, of course, of this event is that we are in the dark on the many issues, many of the main concerns that are raised, and we've made many attempts to get clear and concise answers to the questions, but the answers don't seem to be forthcoming. Nonetheless, it's really important that we try to raise as much awareness of this consultation and the issues pertaining to it as much as possible, so as to positively influence the outcome as much as we can. So by way of structure to this session, it will last for 1 hour. So we'll be under a little bit of time pressure, and our 3 speakers will all form part of one presentation. And again, please feel free to add in your questions at the end. We'll try our best to address those. So our presenters tonight will speak about Greylock's position on the specifications and on the consultation process, as well as giving their perspectives as educationists and as parents. So by way of brief introduction, one of our speakers tonight is Fine Igin. Fine is former principal of Closh the Isagon in Ballachlia. She's former president of Greylock, the organisation. She's current board member of Greylock, and she's an educational expert in the field of Irish as junior and senior cycle, and has been a teacher of Irish for many long years. Secondly, we have Aisling Eyre, who is principal of a Greylock with 30 years experience, and she has an active and professional interest in immersion education. And thirdly, we have Tracy Larchan, who is the director of Unad Acadab na Hoscolaíochta the Gaeilge in Carrow. She has an MA in language planning, and she's a very passionate advocate for intergenerational language transmission and sustaining Irish as a living language in the Gaeltacht and outside of the Gaeltacht. So as you can see, we have a broad range of experience and also parental experience among our speakers tonight, and many contexts also. So I hope you find their presentation useful and thought-provoking on the issues being raised as part of this consultation.
Well, gur míle maith agat a bhlána as sin agus bhhail an fáilte ar a roimh ar fad ag an session ólas agus cóirliúchan se a nacht. I'm sure you're asking the question of why is Greylock organising? Does it see the essential nature of having a consultation process with parents to give them information? The difficulty is that these new draft specifications for Leaving Cert Irish are introducing a new element for you with regard to the Leaving Cert. You may be aware that there has been differentiated specification for junior cycle in recent times, but this new draft specification, which has just been published, is with a view to introducing a similar differentiated curriculum, if you like, at senior cycle. So we want to give you the opportunity to ask the questions, as Blon had said. And some of you, you've already submitted questions, and you'll have the opportunity, as Blon had said, to do so during the session. And then we'll attempt to answer your questions. But the problem is we won't be able to answer all your questions, unfortunately, because we simply don't have definite answers to many of the issues which have been raised. So it's important to understand before we go any further that it's not Greylock who drafted these specifications. It's the NCCA, or the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, which drafted the specifications. And it's the Department of Education then who will be responsible for implementing those specifications in the schools. So it's important for you that you have accurate and up-to-date information about the draft specifications so that you and other members of your school communities can participate in the NCCA consultation process, which opened in February, on the 23rd of February, when these specifications were first published. So there's no point in attempting to give a response to the specifications unless you have the very basic information to help you do so. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm just going to mention some important terms that you might need. Now, as I mentioned, we had another information session last week for the Greylock and with Trivan the Gaeilge. As I mentioned at that, you'd nearly need a PhD in applied linguistics to be able to understand some of the documents published by the NCCA. So I'm going to introduce you to just a small number of the terms which you may not be familiar with. And you can have a look at them. And if you go further into the specifications yourself, you will find that some of the terminology is quite challenging. So you're probably used to, from your own school days, the word syllabus to describe what is the course that's actually being taught, the content of the course that's being taught in various subjects. Now, there's a new word that's come out with the new junior cycle, and they are now described as specifications. So when we talk about an L1 specification, we're talking about the specification or the course content for teaching Irish in schools that are teaching through the medium of Irish. So Gael Chalosty and Scoil na Gaeltachta would be the L1 schools I'll be referring to. The L2 schools then are the schools teaching through the medium of English. Some of you, when you were in school, just talked about your junior cert exam, and you did your first, second and third year, and they were the juniors in the school. Now, the first to third year, that whole area is described as the junior cycle in post-primary schools. And at the end of the junior cycle, they have a new junior cycle exam. It's what it's called. It's not called the junior cert anymore. And then you'll have the senior cycle, which is 5th and 6th year post-primary school. And also that would include transition year as well. They would be considered to be part of the senior cycle, or they don't start the actual specifications until they go into 5th year. What then is a differentiated specification? I've already mentioned that earlier, and that's where you have a different syllabus or a different course to be taught in L1 and L2 schools. So for our purposes here, it means that there is a different Irish, not hugely different, but different Irish course for Irish medium schools and for English medium schools, which, if you think about it, really does make sense in a lot of ways, because obviously they're being taught through the medium of Irish. Learning outcomes is also a very new idea that seems to be permeating a lot of the new specifications. It's really where they set out the knowledge that students are expected to have at the end of the course. Now that we'll be talking a little bit more about them in further detail as I go on. So we go on to the next slide now, and we look at the background. Where did we get to where we are now? Where did this idea of a differentiated curriculum come from? Well, in 1999, for the first time, the new primary school curriculum that came out at that time had a different curriculum for L1 and L2, so for Irish medium schools and for English medium schools. And that's the first time since the foundation of the state that there actually was a separate curriculum for the teaching of Irish in primary schools. And then further, to build on that, a new primary school primary language curriculum has been published and being implemented in primary schools since 2016, gradually as they go up, up first of all up to 2nd class, and then 4th class, and then 6th class. And that's building on the 1999 curriculum, and also has differentiated language curriculum for all Irish and English medium schools. And they have different learning outcomes then at the end. What the children are expected to know at the end they're specified, they're set out in their learning outcomes, and there's a difference between them. Now, another document, you see these documents here, first of all, and then you'll see on the right there, the Department of Education policy for Gaeltacht education. Now, many of the parents here this evening have your children in Gael Chalosty or Irish medium primary schools outside the Gaeltacht, but you really do need to have some information about the Gaeltacht education policy in order to understand where these ideas have come from and how they've been progressed. So the Gaeltacht education policy was developed over a number of years, based very much a huge amount of research and investment was made in it. It was published to be introduced in schools from 2017 to 2022. So if we just move on to tell you what is of relevance or of importance in the Gaeltacht education policy on the next slide.
Sorry, Fiona, can I cut across you there?
Yeah.
So I'm just talking there about on the primary school curriculum where they talk about L1 and L2. And just to say, as a teacher, that when it was introduced, it was a great addition to the children in Greylock, because it gave them taught them the Irish to the level that they were able to improve the level of Irish. They were able to enrich in their language, that it wasn't taught at a basic level. So that differentiated curriculum really was of a huge benefit to those children, to the children in Greylock, that they achieved their highest potential as a result.
That's very good. Thank you very much, Aisling, for that. And so the Greylock education policy, what does it say, or what is its aim of the policy with regard to teaching and learning in Irish? What is it seeking to achieve? It wants to deliver, and I'm quoting from the policy itself, high quality educational experiences through Irish for all students, focusing particular attention on the differentiation, or if you like, the different language needs of native Irish speakers, as well as learners of Irish, and as well, of course, as students in all Irish primary schools. So there are lots of different steps that are laid out in the Greylock education policy, and I'm not going to go into them in detail, but I'll just take an example of things that Greylock schools have to do now in order to fulfil the criteria of being a Greylock school. And they have to, for example, implement the early immersion in their infant classes, which means that the teaching of English is postponed until first class. Now, that's a policy that has been adopted in very many all-Irish primary schools outside the Greylock as well. But it's just something that wasn't across the board in Greylock schools, but now, if they're registered to be part of the scheme as Greylock schools, that has to be implemented. So that was something that they introduced in primary schools. And what's of interest to us is what the Greylock education policy says with regard to the teaching and learning of Irish at post-primary level. So at post-primary level, the Greylock education policy says that they were going to develop a different specification for the teaching of Irish, and this will be provided in L1 schools. And here's a quote from what it says. So they intend to develop differentiated L1 and L2 curriculum specifications for Irish at senior cycle, and ensure that the learning outcomes for L1 curriculum meet the needs of students in Greylock schools and Irish medium schools, including native speakers. So what they're basically saying is work has been done at the primary level, and now we're going to build on that at second level, post-primary level, to ensure that the specifications or that the course that we're offering to the students is catering to their needs. Because remember, they have quite different needs because they're dealing with a wide range of curriculum subjects through the medium of Irish, and they require higher level linguistic skills. So we go on now to the next.
Yeah, maybe before you.
Yes, Trasa.
Yeah, this is Trasa. Just to let you know, I'm a native Irish speaker, rearing my children through Irish in the Connemara Gaeltacht. And I think I'm delighted that the Gaeltacht education policy has come into force. My two children are just in senior infants at the moment. I have twin boys. And now this is only anecdotal evidence. I haven't, you know, I've no analysis or no scientific analysis, but from my own experience, I had nieces and nephews going through the Gaeltacht education system in the 90s mostly, and they would have been reared through Irish as well at home. And I would hear their parents, my brothers or sisters-in-law, saying maybe a month, 2 months into junior infants that they would be coming home with Irish. Now my two are in senior infants with English. With English. Sorry, coming in. Yeah, speaking English after a month or two in school. That has totally changed for my children. I can honestly say, hand on my heart, that they have not come home with English from the primary school. And I'm not saying that we're living, you know, we're living in the Gaeltacht as it is today. It's not totally Irish, 100%. They're exposed to English on television, on apps and games and YouTube and all the rest. But I can say that this Gaeltacht education policy, from my perspective, is working at the moment. They're in a mixed class. There are 11 children, 2 from English-speaking families, 5 from Irish-speaking families only, and then 4 others who are we say mixture between English and Irish, but probably more English than Irish. So you would imagine that they would be coming home with a lot more English than they have, and they're not. They're not playing through English. They're not. It's wonderful. So I really welcome the Gaeltacht education policy, and I think it just makes sense logically that this is what's happening in primary school. Obviously, this has to continue on into secondary school, but have it done properly. So I'll talk more when feeling.
Yeah. So we'll move on now to the next slide, and we look at what does the policy say? What does the Greylock education policy? We're really relying on this because we have so little information from the Department of Education and from the NCCA. So what does it have to say about these L1 and L2 specifications? Well, it says that in the Greylock education policy says it was expected that these specifications will be implemented from September 2017. That's a junior cycle, and work is expected to commence on the development of differentiated L1 and L2 specifications for senior cycle once the differentiated specifications for Irish junior cycle have been developed and are working well in schools. Now, true to their promise, the subjects were in the new differentiated L1 and L2 specifications were introduced in September 2017. And implemented from them, and they were due to be examined then at the end of third year in June 2020. But I don't have to tell you now, because you're all aware, due to the pandemic, the 2020 and indeed this year the 2021 junior cycle examinations have been cancelled. So it's our belief that it cannot be said that the new L1 and L2 specifications at junior cycle are working well in schools at present. The exams haven't taken place, and there has been no review of the specification and the advantages and challenges it presents. Now, undoubtedly, it's an excellent idea, obviously building on the work done in the primary school, but there have been, as will happen, teething problems have come to the fore. Teachers have concerns about particularly the huge number of texts to be studied, literature, and there hasn't been an opportunity for them to raise those issues and to have them dealt with. And really, it's one thing to have difficulties and teething problems with the subject at junior cycle. It's an entirely different thing to have those problems occurring at the Leaving Cert, which is a very, very important exam, as you're very aware. So we'll just move on now to the next slide.
Fiona, I'm cutting across you again.
Yes, no, that's great. I'm delighted.
Just to add that I, like Trasa, I also have twins. My twins are older. They're in fourth year, in transition year in Colossaone and Isagon. So I'm a parent on the receiving end of the new junior cycle, Asquega. And while, yes, it was great that there was a challenge there for the children and the level of Irish that they were learning to increase their ability then in other subjects. However, it wasn't without fault. There were mistakes, or not, I wouldn't go so far as to say mistakes. But yeah, we could learn from it, and it would only be of benefit then for the Leaving Cert. But I think until we're able to do that effectively, my children didn't sit their junior cert. I just knew from looking at them what they were studying. There was a huge amount of literature. It did cause stress, and two children with very different abilities, different interests. So I think that big picture needs to be looked at before anything is set in stone. From a parent's point of view, now my children won't be doing this, but I would just say that for other children going forward for the Leaving Cert, that review takes place and that reflection is done on the successes and the challenges of the junior cycle as it is at the moment.
I mean, as I say, it would stand to reason that that's best practice in any new educational developments, that you review them before you progress to particularly a high stakes exam like the Leaving Cert. Absolutely. So where do we stand at present? Well, as the new Leaving Cert draft specifications were published on the 23rd of February 2021 for consultation. Now, I would like to emphasize that they are drafts, and as Aisling says, nothing is set in stone yet. The current plan is further implementation in schools in 2023. And that they will be examined then for the first time in June 2025. There will be higher and ordinary level in both specifications, in the L1 and L2, but there will no longer be a foundation level exam. Now, that's obviously not something that you're particularly worried about. It's a source of concern to teachers in L2 schools because they feel that there is a cohort of students for whom foundation level suited their learning needs, just as we feel that we have a cohort of students in Greylock and in Scoil na Gaeltachta whose learning needs need to be met as well. The NCCA compiled the specifications, as I mentioned at the beginning, in consultation with various interested parties. They have various Mehel Ferber development groups, they have the board for the senior cycle, they have the council of the NCCA, all of whom will have looked at these. Many of them, involved in education, many, educationalists and people who are maybe outside or at third level and so on. The specification documents themselves, which there's a link to them there. I think that might be the one Osquelia, but it's very easy to find them Osperla. If you just go on the NCCA website and look up Irish language consultation. The documents are long and difficult to read without specialist knowledge. I gave you only a small flavour at the beginning for some of the terminology that's involved in them. I can tell you I had difficulty ploughing through them myself. At the time I had to go back over things and say, what are they exactly trying to say here? They're somewhat academic, although I know in the course of the development, they did try to simplify them and make them more accessible. But I think I actually mentioned at the last meeting that on last Wednesday, I decided that I was actually going to do the survey, fill out the survey. And it took me 2.5 hours to fill it out. And that's with having a very good background knowledge myself. However, I'll come to that later on. We'll move on to the next slide. The role of the Department of Education then. So I've kind of outlined to you that it's the NCCA there that actually draft the specifications that write out the actual document itself, but it's the Department of Education who implements them in the schools. The NCCA doesn't have the answer to the major questions which are troubling parents. And what are these major questions? Now, we've had, as I say, a consultation last week with parents, and we've also been, listening to what's going on with the parents raising issues with through various social media. The areas that seem to be causing most concern for parents is the issue of choice. Will students have a choice, or will the L1 specification be compulsory for students in Greylock schools and in Greylock? That's one thing parents are anxious to have certainty about. Will there be compensation for students taking the L1 exam for the extra work and effort involved? What extra resources? Will there be extra resources and a proper course provided to schools to support the new specifications? Will there be an investment in producing materials? What exactly then are the differences between L1 and L2 specifications? How different is the standard? How much more challenging is one exam than the other? Greylock is seeking answers to these questions on an ongoing basis from the Department of Education, largely, and also from the NCCA. Unfortunately, we don't have the answers for them all for you this evening, but we have maybe a little bit. So we move on to the next slide, the one about choice and whether this exam is going to be compulsory. So will it be compulsory for all students in Greylock and Scoilna to follow the new L1 specification? There is as yet no clear confirmation in this issue from the department, something which, as you are aware, is adding to unrest and uncertainty among students, teachers and parents, and indeed, a lot of rumours going around and people unsure as to the status of these new specifications. Now, the only evidence that we have, or the only information that we have in black and white with regard to this, comes from the Greylock education policy, which is why I put so much emphasis on it at the beginning of my talk here this evening. Because the Greylock education policy states that there will be a requirement on, this is quoting from the policy, all recognised Greylock schools to make L1 Irish curriculum specification available for students and to actively promote student uptake of it. So all Greylock schools will have to provide it, make it available, and encourage students, promote actively the student uptake. That's what's written there. To read into that, well, we see there's one other piece as well in the Greylock education policy, which gives us a slight indication. Post-primary schools recognised as Greylock schools may also make the L2 curriculum specification available for students, where it is evident that the L2 specification will meet more effectively such students' Irish language learning needs. So that's the only evidence that we have of the thinking of the department, and it's in the Greylock education policy. It's not in the specification itself, which is leading to some of the uncertainty at the moment. But from the above, it would appear, and I can't say it's certain, but it would appear that the L1 course will not be compulsory for all students in L1 schools, that's Greylock or Greylock, and students will have a choice as to which course best suits their learning needs. But it would be of great assistance to us if the Department of Education gave clear and unambiguous confirmation of this, because this is a huge area for people. People are afraid, oh, my child is going to be disadvantaged, this Irish is going to be seen as a piano, that they have to do a harder course and there's going to be no choice. Now, the other question that's worrying students is the next slide of whether there is going to be compensation. And
Fiona, just to go back there on Greylock schools, this is also Greylock, an awful lot of the parents here would be Greylock, so it's not just Greylock schools, it is also.
Well, if they're saying it's going to be in that situation for Greylock schools, it would have to be the exact same for Greylock. Whatever they say there would have to be for Greylock as well. You couldn't have a situation where there was a choice in a Greylock school and there wasn't in a Greylock.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just so, yeah, thank you very much for that. Just anytime there now, either Trust or Aisling, that you feel anything needs clarification, just join in. So why would a student undertake to study the L1 course? Now we're talking about students in their final 2 years of school, undertaking a very high stakes examination, a lot of pressure on them to achieve CAO points and gain places at third level. This question of why a student would actually choose to do this has been raised by various groups, not just Greylock, but Conradh na Gaeilge and many other Irish language organisations. And the department, we've raised it with the Department of Education and with the NCCA. The NCCA doesn't have the answer to the question. The responsibility for providing answers to this question lies within the remit of the Department of Education. Teachers and school principals are very concerned about this issue. They're concerned about, you know, having a school and how many students are going to take it and why would they take it. Currently, as things stand at the moment, the department is not in favour of awarding bonus points, as they do in the case of maths, where there is a 25-point bonus for higher level maths. But the Minister, Norma Foley, said last week that the department is reviewing measures to incentivise students to undertake the L1 specification, and it's doing so in consultation with Rin na Gaeltachta on the matter. So what do we know about the thinking of the department with regard to incentives? Well, if they're not going to award bonus points, what are they talking about? There are some hints in the Greylock education policy where 3 possibilities are mentioned. They mention, number 1, third level bursary scheme. Now, these bursaries, many of you probably won't be aware of that, but I'm long enough now in Greylock to know that in the past, up to 2013, there were Leaving Cert scholarships available to students in Gaelcholáiste and in Scoil na Gaeltachta. They would be the top students. They would get a third level scholarship, which would see them through their undergraduate and indeed their postgraduate, where they really would have fees, and they were very beneficial. But Rory Quinn, when he was Minister for Education, abolished those scholarships. So I would see this third level bursary scheme in a way as an attempt maybe to bring this back, but it would only be available. You're talking there about something that's purely going to be available for the most able students. So a small cohort. So they're not going to give a bursary to everybody who takes an L1 course. There's no way that's going to happen. It'll be for a very small cohort. The second thing they're talking about in the Greylock education policy is providing 10% of places reserved in teacher training colleges for students who achieve a certain grade in Leaving Cert L1 Gaeilge. So again, it's not going to be there for everybody, but for the able students who get a certain grade in L1 Gaeilge, that there'll be places reserved for them. Now, there are already, for the Gaeltacht people here, there are already a way for students from Gaeltacht areas to access places at in teacher training colleges with slightly lower points requirement. So I don't see that as being a huge incentive. Anybody anything to add to that?
I agree, Fiona. And as you said, it's only catering for a very small minority, and it's pigeonholing the language into just for teachers, as opposed to all the extra jobs that will be available in. What did the figure Blonde had last week for the number of people the civil service will be taking in?
20% of the new recruits for the civil service under the new Billa Changa will be to provide, in order that the public services can be provided through them. Every department will have to now, or every public service will have to be able to provide their services through the medium of Irish, and they have to be able to recruit 20% of Caintóirí Inúil Gaeilge, able Irish speakers.
With the proper standard, relevant standard of education. Yeah. And likewise for jobs in Brussels as translators. And these jobs are now coming on stream where they mightn't have been before. Mm-hmm. So it is very important that it's open to all, that all children can access whatever bonus is there, as opposed to just a small minority.
Well, the third incentive that I'll come back to you now, Trust, in a second, that they mention is that there'll be a potential for special recognition for L1 for people who are going to do a course at third level, something like Fianter in DCU or some course where there would be a higher level of competency in Irish required. Now, again, if you took those 3 of those together, they would only form a small cohort, a small proportion of the cohort of students taking the Leaving Cert in Gaelcholáiste or Scoil na Gaeltachta every year. Trasta, did you want to come in there?
Yes, I was just going to say, for native Irish speakers, and we've had years that quite often we're great at speaking the language, but not so good at writing the language, because the way we speak obviously is not how you write. And I think that this sort of course needs to focus on this as well, that native Irish speakers will learn all the skills of the language, not just speaking. For the language to survive, we need to have, and for that 20% in the civil service or whatever, they need to have all the skills, oral, comprehension, writing, listening, speaking, all has to be included. And I would hope that such a course as this would
fill that requirement, is it?
Yeah, fill that requirement, that's it. I'm thinking this way again.
I know, was thinking that, Chair. So we move on to the next slide and look at the supports and resources. And that was another question that parents would have. What supports and resources are available? Well, in 1999, when the primary curriculum came in with the differentiated Irish curriculum in L1 and 2 schools for the first time, a wide range of resources were developed to support the curriculum, and there was a huge financial investment. At the time, as it happens, I was on the board of COG, which is was responsible largely for providing some of that finance, and I know that there was an enormous amount of money provided to support and develop resources, and these resources are now being digitized and updated. It's an ongoing process. The course that was developed is Sé Don Sí. It's a comprehensive language course, and it's available in the 3 dialects with books, videos, songs, rhymes, etc., all supporting learning from the infants class up to Ranga Sé. And it would be well worth your while taking a moment yourself to go on the website and look at what is available for Sé Don Sí. By 6th class, students will have read a wide range of literature and developed appropriate language skills. Now, the need to build on this work at post-primary level and to ensure continuity has been clear for some time, and particularly among people who, are knowledgeable about this, that it was really foolish to have made such a huge investment at primary level. Excellent resources available. Then students are going into first year and post-primary school, and they are undertaking a course that is basically for learners with textbook, the Irish language textbook, half in English. I
add to that as well, Fiona. I have experience of Sé Don Sí, having taught it myself for years, and my children having experienced it in school as well. And I did see that they had learned Irish to a level that, because they were in school through the medium of Irish, they had learned Irish to the appropriate level. It challenged them. Then when they went into secondary school, they themselves even found it bizarre that they were getting textbooks. They didn't have textbooks, but their friends had textbooks with English in it, that it wasn't taught in the same manner at all. And in order for T.A. to be taught effectively, or L1, excuse me, my grade coming in there, the resources have to be put in place. Sé Don Sí helped primary schools so much to teach the language to the appropriate level that the same has to be provided for at second level.
And when we say investment, I'm talking about, huge financial investment. Teachers were freed to work full time on this, developed, as I say, in the 3 different dialects, an enormous amount of money. We're talking about millions of euro were spent on developing that. Now we have a situation then, so it was set out in the Greylock Education Policy, the introduction of the new differentiated specification L1 and L2 came in 2017, but the same range of supports as are available with Sé Don Sí have not been provided to support the L1 specification. In fact, when the L1 specification came in, we only heard about it in November of 2016. It came in September 2017, and COG were left at the last minute trying to rush a book out to try and support it without any research or any of the kind of supports and development that was necessary and had gone into Sé Don Sí and investment. So no work at all has begun to develop resources to support the proposed Leaving Cert L1 specification, which is, extremely worrying to say the least. We move on to the next slide. So you might be asking yourself, and parents indeed are asking us, what are the differences between the L1 and L2 specifications? Well, it comes back to this word I mentioned to you at the beginning about the learning outcomes, what the student is expected to know at the end of the course. Now, Greylock has compared the learning outcomes in the 2 specifications as they're written at the moment and found only a very limited number of differences between them. This is because this is the method that they now use to set out the aims and objectives at the end of the course. They call them learning outcomes, but they're very, very vague. As a result, it isn't clear really to teachers, and this is a great source of worry to teachers and school principals, what the difference in standard is that would be expected from students in the final exam. It would appear from the specifications, and I'm going to show you an example of one in a moment, that a student taking ordinary level Irish in an English medium school has more or less the same learning outcomes as a student taking higher level Irish in an Irish medium school, which would lead you to think that learning outcomes really are very meaningless for the teacher in the classroom. When we go to look at the literature requirements between the 2 courses, we find that there's the only extra number of texts that have to be studied in L1 are 3 extra poems. Apart from that, it's the same number of texts. Now, they may not be the exact same texts, but it's the same number of texts to be studied in L1 and L2 specifications at higher level. So really, we're working here in a vacuum until such time as a list of texts and sample exam papers along with marking schemes are made available by the State Exams Commission and by the NCCA. It is actually impossible for us to really give a proper assessment of the differences between the 2 specifications. So I'd love to be able to tell you, this is what your child will be expected to achieve, your son or daughter at L1 Gaeilge in the Leaving Cert. This is the standard they should have achieved. But it's really just too vague. I couldn't actually, decide that without having further, well, as somebody described it to me, it's like we've been given the bones and nobody's put the meat on the bones. And that's what has to be done. It has to be filled out. We have to be informed, and it has to be much, much clearer to schools what exactly the difference between these 2 specifications is. Now, with regard to the provision of exam papers, well, the list of texts is not yet available, and say it will be available in the next, I don't know exactly. The NCCA have told us that the State Exams Commission, the SEC, do not provide sample exam papers until the November before the first exam. So if this is to be examined in June 2025, we will see the sample papers for the first time in November 2024. Now, this is not acceptable for an exam as important as the Leaving Cert. We know, and some of you may be aware, that when the sample papers for the new junior cycle were published in November 2019 to be examined in 2020, that there was uproar about them because they were seen to be far too complicated and didn't match the learning outcomes as the teachers perceived them. Now, whatever, as I say, about making those mistakes at junior cycle, that is not on at senior cycle. It is simply not good enough to put students through that. Now, I'll give you a little, in the next slide, I'll give you a little example of some of the learning outcomes and why I say that they're not very different. So 1.6 learning outcome, critically choose texts that relate to their particular interests, critically choose texts that relate to their interests so that they can enjoy and understand it. So there's very little difference there. Manipulate information, and then it's geography, Tishka, I left that in Irish, I'm sorry, I want the next one. Recognize and discuss accurate, rich input for each of the language skills. Recognize accurate, rich input for each of the language skills. So there's very little difference, and I've raised this issue with the NCCA, and they say, well, there's some words in there that, that make it more challenging, but that doesn't really tell you what the standard is. So we go on to the next slide now, which is the weighting of the marks. This was something now which you may have heard some talk about in the media, that there, as you know, up to now, well, since 2012, there have been 40% of the marks in the Leaving Cert Irish for the oral exam. And that's been reduced in the new weighting marks to 25%, 35%, which a lot of the Irish teachers are unhappy about. Not so much just the 5%, but the message it sends out that the, oral, it's downgrading to the status of the oral, which many teachers are worried about because there's no oral component at the junior cycle. If you were to hold on to the 35 or 40%, it certainly would be very desirable that the oral exam should be restructured and that then should be put to those series of pictures that they learn off by heart, which have very minimal educational value, particularly for speakers in all Irish schools and particularly in Greylock areas. So that gives you an example there. You'll see that it's at higher level and ordinary level, and there's less than marks for the literature at ordinary level. And I just pass on now quickly to the next slide because I'm very conscious that I would like to be able to address your questions, and I'm looking at the time. So where does Greylock stand? Well, Greylock believes that there should be differentiated specifications for Irish at post-primary level, which cater for the needs of all students. And that's for the students who find Irish very challenging and without a specification that meets their needs, could be looking for an exemption, that there will be an increase in the number of students looking for exemption for Irish. So we're anxious that there should be specifications that cater for the needs of students at all ends of the spectrum, as is provided for in the primary language curriculum. So we're saying here that we do think that it is a good idea that there would be a differentiated L1 specification to meet the needs of students who have native Irish speakers, who have excellent Irish language skills, and that they should get recognition for that through bonus points in their Leaving Cert, that they would be able to undertake an exam which would better meet their learning requirements. Because, as I have said, these students are at Leaving Cert level required to answer at higher level, particularly in subjects as diverse as economics, home economics, geography, physics, chemistry, history, subjects that are required to discuss the topics that they need to discuss through the medium of Irish. They need very substantial, well-developed language skills. And a differentiated curriculum would help them to develop them. But there's no point in talking even about introducing that unless there's going to be some compensation made available to them. It would also give them a better idea if there is an attempt made through this differentiated curriculum to discuss areas of Irish language, the history of the Irish language, the importance and significance of it as part of our Western European civilization, so that they have a language awareness, that they have an awareness of the rich heritage of Irish as a literary language leaving the schools. And that's what I think perhaps, Trasa, that's what you were talking about, that you would like for your children. Are you muted there, Trasa? I think you might be muted.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So that they would achieve their potential in the language, that's what they started, the journey that I've started on, that they can become the best Irish speakers, the best Irish writers, that all the skills would be covered, and that they would be challenged in secondary school as opposed to, and I'm not saying that the course, I see somebody there questioned about that the course at the moment is quite challenging for some people, but I would say we're not looking, obviously we want a more challenging course, but also a more suitable course that will challenge the students in where they need to be challenged, if that makes sense.
And give them the skills to be able to better handle the other areas of the curriculum.
Yes.
You know, because if they're not able to answer the other subjects, and it does happen occasionally, the students take the other subjects through the medium of English because they feel they haven't got the language skills to answer through Irish. And remember, there are bonus marks available in the Leaving Cert for students for answering their subjects through Irish to compensate them for the extra effort that's made. But I feel that this would be another element to that area that would really support students in having the incentive to improve their language skills at Leaving Cert. So Greylock is advocating the following from the Department of Education and the NCCA in order to ensure that provision is made, and this type of provision is made at post-primary level. So Greylock requests that the deadline for consultation on the Leaving Cert draft specifications is postponed until there's been a review of L1 and L2 Greylock Junior Cycle, and we spelt out earlier some of the problems that arise there. We're also asking that the Department of Education guarantee that no Leaving Cert Greylock specification that is more challenging, or as Trasa said, maybe more suitable, be introduced without providing compensation for students taking that exam in the form of bonus points. Now, you know, the department say that they're not favourable to bonus points, but that's the context in which we're operating. We're operating in a context where CAO points are at a premium and the 25 extra points being awarded for higher level maths, for project maths, a maths course, which many maths teachers in the country might see as being more challenging, maybe even easier than the previous maths course. Confirmation, we're looking also for confirmation from the department that it will not be compulsory for all students in Greylock and Scoil na Gaeltachta to take the exam if they do not wish to do so, or if they do not feel it meets their particular learning needs. We're also asking that the NCA take cognizance of the concerns of teachers regarding the reduction in the marks for the oral component of the exam recommended in the draft specification from 40 to 35%. We also would like a different name to be given to the L1 course. The course is not limited to students in Greylock and Scoil na Gaeltachta, and that's set out in the specification. It's actually open to students in all post-primary schools. And there may very well be schools, I know there's a school not very far from myself, an English medium primary school, that is offering the L1 specification for junior cycle already, because they have quite a number of students coming into their school from Irish medium primary schools who haven't gone on to, maybe didn't get places in a second level Greylock. We're also asking that the list of the literature and text be published immediately, as due to the lack of detail in the learning outcomes, the draft specification can't be assessed without this list. We're asking as well for an Irish language course with a wide range of resources like Sean She be developed at junior cycle, which will be comparable and built on the skills of Sean She in primary school. We're asking for sample exam papers and marking schemes be provided to assist teachers in assessing the draft specification and to enable them to give accurate feedback during the consultation. We're also asking that the Leaving Cert specifications not be introduced until such time as a language course has been developed which caters for the needs of all students. And that's particularly talking about a language course that builds on Sean She, builds on a course for the junior cycle, has a course then available before the students begin this, not like 6 years after they begin the course, that the course is developed and the resources and supports are available before the course is introduced. And the list of earning outcomes is not an adequate guidance for classroom teachers. And we're also asking that attention be paid to the feedback and recommendations and the concerns of school communities as expressed through the consultation, and that those concerns and recommendations inform further actions by the NCCA and the Department of Education. So the next slide just brings you on to the consultation process, which is underway. As I say, the draft specifications were published on 23rd of February. The normal course, as the NCCA is frequently telling us, they normally give 6 to 8 weeks for a consultation, but they're making a very big deal about giving 6 months, well, 3 months and 6 months for the consultation on this. Now, we're not really impressed by that, because as far as we're concerned, 3 months of that will be the school holidays, and the 3 months since the 23rd of February have been a very, very disturbed time in schools, with students just coming back and teachers getting to grips with the credited grades for the Leaving Cert in 2021, and not trying to get on top of that before they even start thinking about filling out a survey and what's going to happen in 2025. However, you have a voice, please take the opportunity to have it heard. There is a process underway about the issue. We strongly recommend that you participate in the consultation so your opinions are heard. The deadlines mentioned below are under review by the NCCA at present, and we are optimistic that they will be extended, because we've made a very strong case for the fact that in the middle of a pandemic, it's not the best time for schools to be being consulted on any major changes, because they're struggling already to handle the procedures for this year's Leaving Cert. So we're asking for that, and also we see that the 3 months during the summer, most teachers will not be available and not engaging in this, and perhaps parents as well have other things on their mind during the summer. So the deadlines mentioned are, these are the ones at present. So the following are the ways in which you can participate in the consultation. There's an online survey, and you'll notice there, Peggy, if you put your, you can fill that out. You can just click on that there. And we'll have these slides available on the website tomorrow. And the current deadline for that is the 28th of May. Now, I would put a health warning with the online survey. I mentioned earlier that it took me 2.5 hours to fill out that survey. And I'm very familiar over the last 2 years with the content of the new draft syllabus, the draft specifications. I had the document printed out and 39 pages of it and open in front of me, both the T1 and the T2, and it still took me 2.5 hours. If I wasn't familiar with it, it would have taken me a half a day or more to read the specifications, first of all, before I even attempted filling out the survey. It's very detailed. It requires considerable understanding of the methods of thinking in the NCCA. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has filled it out, but certainly it's very challenging. So I would say that your best bet is to go for the submission. And the submissions are open until the 31st of August 2021. I imagine, I'm certainly hopeful, that it will be extended. The other option that you have is to email Greylock with your opinions. Express your opinions by email to us, and the email address is given there. And any opinions that, and including the questions that have been raised in advance of the information session this evening, they will all be taken into account by Greylock when we are drafting our own submission. So we're working on that before the 31st of August, and any opinions that we will take that into consideration. And we would certainly recommend that you participate in it, because if you don't, they'll proceed anyway without, we're also looking for a meeting with the Department of Education and with the Minister for Education to discuss our concerns with Norma Foley. But it would help, the more parents that respond and raise the issues that we have raised here this evening or other concerns that you have, the better for the consultation. So I'd just like to thank you all. Míle buíochas liver fad as teacht agus le chuid amagúirt suas, and it's really very, very indicative. I think there's nearly 70 people participating this evening. It's a great credit to the parents in our schools that you've taken the trouble to listen into this and to inform yourselves about what's ahead of us. And hopefully you'll build on that and make a submission, or send your opinions and thoughts to us at Greylock, and we can incorporate them in our work. So gur míle maith agaibh, and I hope that the session has been of value to you tonight. Níl will tusa trasa no Gera Cooper Rudder.
I wanted to say something there, Fiona. Sorry, interrupting you there. Just to add to what Fiona said there. If Fiona's saying the online survey took her 2.5 hours, I would be 2 months doing it. So I'm not even going to pretend that I'm going to, but I am putting in my own submission. And as a parent, this has nothing to do with me being a pre-vida, but I'll be asking them that they clarify that there is a choice for children, that there will be bonus points awarded, because we all know for our children doing the Leaving Cert, there's enough pressure on them. We don't want an additional pressure that they're not going to gain from, because it is a points race at the end of the day. So I'll be looking for that clarification on choice. Will there be bonus points? And that a review of that nothing be implemented until a robust review of the junior cert has taken place. I will also be, because I have an interest in it, to ask them to ensure that proper resources be put in place. I'm not looking at it from a teacher's point of view. Teachers at second level will have other concerns, but I'm looking at it as a parent, and that's what I would like to know as a parent, that do my children have choice to whether they take this or not? Just clarify this for me. Are there going to be bonus points? Will you review can you guarantee us that you won't implement this until a robust review of the junior cert has taken place? And will the proper resources be put in place for the schools? Similar to Shade on She. I think that just came up in a question there a minute ago. Did it, Blonit? I don't know. I know Greylock might have a different line, but that's myself personally what I would be sending in.
Yeah, and Aisling, just to come in on that, and that relates also to one of the questions that has come in at the end. So just in relation to the survey being pretty heavy going, as this participant suggested that we could put maybe 10 recommendations together. So what our plan at Greylock is to do is to put together a template of ideas that parents can use. We'll have a separate one also for teachers that might be a little bit more technical, but we, based on this presentation and on the questions that we've received in advance of this and during the meeting, we'll be collating all of that and putting a template together. So we will be in contact regarding that.
Are there any, Trasa, have you anything you'd like to add, or are there other questions that have come in? Because I've not been reading the questions.
There are. I can go through the questions, but if Trasa wants to come in first.
Presenting about the questions. But again, I would just like to say that, please don't reject this because of the mistakes of the past. We said that they haven't done, they should have done with the junior cycle. I think this is an absolute necessary for the Irish language. I presume the people who are listening to me, you've chosen to send your children to Gael Cholashti, to Gael Scolni, to Gael Cholashti, or your Gaeltacht parents. So obviously you're interested in the Irish language, and I just think this is the right way to go. But it has to be done in the proper manner, proper funding, worked out properly, that is not compulsory, and that there is compensation.
Yeah.
If those things happen, if what Greylock have placed in front of you here tonight, if they do what we ask, I think this is going to be great for the Irish language and just the survival of the Irish language. But yeah, and
it would be a great thing from this evening's Corluchon or consultation if we could sort of change the narrative about this whole consultation and the idea of an L1 syllabus and something that's a negative penalty for students to something that is an opportunity, a real chance to do something very, very positive for the Irish language. Irish is a language with a long and rich cultural history, literary tradition. We are going to need poets, writers, journalists, to have a creative language, to have a literary language in the future. If we have respect for the language, we must have people who have very, very good linguistic and literary skills from post-primary level. And we would like to have people, not just as people working in the media and even in translation, but people in all walks of life, from doctors to lawyers to dentists, to everybody who is there and available to provide services to us and our families through the medium of Irish. And I think it really is a huge opportunity, and it's most important that it's done correctly.
Yes.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely, Fiona Gormagat.
Okay, I might just jump in then and ask a few questions if that's okay with the panelists. Actually, just a further clarifying question regarding the template. So we will email that to the participants on this evening's Zoom call as well when we have that prepared. That should be no problem. Okay, so just one participant has raised 3 questions. I'm going to group them together because there is perhaps some overlap. So has it been decided that an L1 and L2 will be introduced and that these draft specifications are purely for the content of the curriculum for L1 and L2. So bear with me first.
Well, I think...
Has it been decided that an L1 and L2, sorry, that's same question again. Is the current Irish Leaving Cert structured in such a way?
We're losing you, Blonage, I can't hear you. Perhaps somebody else could take over there.
Is the current Irish Leaving Cert structured in such a way that LC1 schools already have a different syllabus from L2 schools, and the question options in the current exam papers covers this off?
Yeah, that's it.
No, currently they sit the same exam.
Yeah, that's, I know, yeah.
At Leaving Cert, but there are an L1 and L2 now, a junior cycle.
Yes. And then the other ones, has it been decided that L1 and L2 will be introduced, and these draft specifications are purely for the content of the specification and syllabus?
Well, the decision has been made, yes, that they're the decision is made that they are going to introduce them. The question is how they're going to support them. What are the big systemic questions about, are they going to be compulsory and are they going to be compensated? That's what we're discussing at the moment. And they're being, in my opinion, rushed through without giving time. This is still a consultation. They will take opinions on board. They hasn't been approved yet by the minister. The idea is that it will be progressed, but the minister has to sign off on it in the end of the day. So there will be a further consultation document produced by the NCC on the basis of the feedback from this consultation. So that's why it is so important that you put your opinions in. You let your voice be heard.
Okay, this is another, sorry, my connection is a bit off this evening. Another question has just come in. Is there any chance that there could be alternative pathways at L1 level, example, literature-based and scientific technology-based streams, or sub-options which would allow an academic track, but also a more employment practical approach that I feel would be more beneficial for development of jobs in the Belfast Civil Service, etc.?
Well, that is actually a very interesting question, because as you may or may not be aware, there's a whole consultation going on at the moment, a whole review of the Leaving Cert in general, which is why I'm quite surprised that they're pushing ahead with this change at the moment, because within the next number of months, the document, the review, the consultation document for reform of the Leaving Cert is, in general, the overall approach in the Leaving Cert is going to come up for consultation with parents, which would envisage, and the idea behind this is there'll be far more scope for apprenticeships and short courses, modules, and I think that it's not envisaged that the status of Irish as a core subject, Irish, English or Maths, will be changed, but there will be possibilities, and that they're going to be explored. Now, there's nothing definite yet. They just have a general broad outline document. You may have seen something in the newspaper about it recently, and that's due to go out very shortly for consultation with schools, parents and other education partners. So it is a very pertinent question, because there are major changes coming down the pipeline in terms of CAO and Leaving Cert and status of subjects, and reviewing the status of the Leaving Cert applied and giving, practical subjects more status and so on. An interesting question.
Okay, this next question basically questions the differentiation between L1 and L2. Why can they just not call it a new course like Gaeilge Imach, like applied maths instead? I don't know anyone to Gaeilge that would be happy to basically happy with this draft specification. And the new junior cert is too literature heavy, and there's huge difficulty developing other language skills.
Well, we've dealt with that, we've agreed with that. There's actually more literature on the course for the junior cycle currently than is proposed for the new L1 course for the Leaving Cert, which strikes me as being very strange. So I think all the teachers, and that's why I've said that it's so important to have a review of the junior cycle to learn from the mistakes, because we cannot be making these mistakes at Leaving Cert. The first part of that question, again, I think I had dealt with, or something I don't have the answer to.
So the differentiation between L1 and L2, I suppose just the justification for a differentiation between the L1 and L2.
We've discussed that.
We've done that. Yep, that's covered. And then just a comment that a lot of political pressure is required for resourcing and investing in that was related to the resource issue when we're talking about Shade on She, and then the equivalent at post-primary level.
It is a great opportunity, because many of you will remember from your own years in school, it's a very ad hoc, haphazard Irish courses. You had, one teacher who taught something one year, another teacher doing something different the next year, and no really well thought out coordinated course, you know, progression with developing all the different language skills and high quality material to back it up. That just hasn't been available for Irish speakers, for native Irish speakers, particularly who've been hard done by in that way, and also for children in Greylock.
Yeah, another parent here, my daughter completed her Leaving Cert in Irish in 2019 without having read a complete novel in Irish. Previously, she'd read lots of novels in Irish in primary school and in Shade on Sheep programme. Higher order thinking skills need to be developed in an appropriate course in which children will be taught to analyse, debate, develop opinions and apply critical thinking.
Well, I couldn't agree with that more. And I mean, the requirements in the English course where they have to study 6 poems by 6 poets, a Shakespeare play, 3 novels or a novel, a play and a film. I mean, it's a very challenging course, the higher level Leaving Cert and you know, in English. And for Greylock students not to be given an opportunity to develop those kinds of skills in their own native language is, I think, doing them a disservice, but they must be compensated for it.
Yeah, and then
they're already achieving a very high standard in what is their second language in English.
Okay, and then for the final question that seems to have come in, very interesting but very worrying. My son will be the first year doing the new junior cert paper next year, and sorry, let's just jump on here. And then again, the first year doing the new Leaving Cert paper. Will he be prepared enough for both? Will he be able for it? I'm very worried, but I'm also very disappointed, as I feel it will put us and the parents off sending children to Greylock. Find those in the grab. Okay.
Yeah, I just say as a parent not in the Greylock, that's where the choice would come in. That's where it's be important that as I said, 2 children, very different levels, that my children would have the choice. That the child who perhaps wants to continue with Irish into 3rd level and you know, as Trassa said, to attain the level of language most appropriate to him or her to the best of his ability or her ability, and my other child then would have that choice. I think that's very important. And I think, as Fiona said, to change the narrative that this is a positive thing, that we're catering for all levels of ability in the schools, that we're catering for those who want to continue and those we don't want to make it negative. As a parent, this is what I'm saying. So I would hope that if it was clarified regarding choice, that would help that parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually one more has just come in, but it's more a comment from a person who is a former employee of the NCCA and works in the education sector. I think we'd agree with this statement that it makes absolutely no sense that this L1 course has been put ahead of the overall review of the Leaving Cert. So I think that might be a good point to include in your submissions.
And also the fact that the Department of Education is currently working on a policy. They say that it's part of their programme for government that they're going to provide a policy for the teaching of Irish, teaching and learning of Irish at all levels in the school system, an overarching policy. And they're also talking about, based on the success of the policy, the Native Greylock, the Greylock education policy and Norma Foley said last week that they're already at the preliminary stages of developing a policy for the teaching of Irish in Irish medium schools. So those 2 things are being undertaken by the Department of Education, while at the same time the NCCA is undertaking a review of Leaving Cert Irish, introducing what is really a major change. So really all these different areas need to be speaking to one another, and there needs to be some joined up thinking.
Absolutely, and we'll be including those points in our submissions, and like I say, we'll be sending templates to you. We'd welcome, as Fiona outlined earlier on, we'd very much welcome more comments and questions. You can email them to us. We will try to answer them as much as we can, but more than anything, we'll push for answers from those that have the authority to answer them, namely the NCCA and the Department of Education. So on behalf of Greylock Educus, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the speakers that have given their time so generously and provided such comprehensive information and presentations this evening that I hope will form the basis of your submissions and of your surveys. So thank you also for all the active participation in I can see that there are still some comments, I think, coming in for the active participation in this meeting. I can see from the comments that you have found it very useful, so I'm pleased to see that. We will feed all of this back to the NCCA as part of our submission. So the recording from this event will be available on our YouTube channel, and that should be available tomorrow, hopefully, as well as the slides. They'll be emailed to you, and also the Irish language version of this event, which we held last week, and which which Fina referred to, that's also available on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to circulate to your colleagues or to other parents that you think may be interested. So again, I think that's it from us at this point. I'm sure we'll be having more discussions on this topic as the consultation progresses. So Gurmila Magi ar fad.